Yo, so today I wanted to look at mid-side EQ, and the reason I'm doing this, it's for my friend Brian, or Enter Entity. He was having, well, not issues with this track, but he was asking for feedback, and some of the feedback that a friend of mine and I gave him um, was that the bass line or just the bass frequencies on the track in general could use a little bit of cleaning up in the stereo field. Um, so I wanted to show off mid-side EQ for this reason. And there's a couple ways we could tackle the issue of cleaning up the low frequency range in the stereo field. Um, the reason we use mid-side EQ is just to make our life a little easier. So I wanted to show it using FabFilter, using the Ableton EQ, and then I'll also show how you can do it manually if you don't have an EQ that has a mid-side mode. And essentially what mid-side is just splitting your mid frequencies from your side frequencies. So all the mono information, anything in like the middle of your mix versus everything that's left and right. So let's go. This is the track he sent me. I'm going to take these plugins off because we are not using them yet. So I think the bass line actually sounds nice with a stereo field to it, but we can sort of allow the top end elements like the leads and the pads to fill out that stereo field, where we can cut the low end in the bass. And what we can also do is sort of modulate it, which I've done here, so that the little pre-drop bass line can be stereo, and then when the main section hits, we can have just the mono signal, or we can take out a lot of the stereo field anyway, just so that it's less messy. So for example, let's just take a look at what's going on. So if I turn on ozone, I'm not really using it to do anything, as long as I set this back to where it was. All these are turned off, so we're just looking at what's going on using the imager here. So if I play just the bass line, we can see that it's pretty wide in general, but we can sort of fix this, and that's what we're going to do using the mid-side EQ. So I'll show you what just the low end frequency range looks like. So if we set this to like 200 hertz, anything, I'm just listening to 200 and below, and it's still pretty wide, as you can see here on the spectrum, on this graph. Even if I pull this down into the very low end range, like 80 to 74 hertz, it's the lowest it'll go, we still have tons of stereo information, and this can be problematic in those situations, in a club, on a phone that only has a mono speaker, on like a little Bluetooth speaker that it's just one speaker. So what we're gonna do is, I could do this straight in ozone, but I wanted to show it in Pro Q because Brian wanted to see Pro Q, and I'm gonna show it in the Ableton EQ because I want it to be accessible. This applies to any DAW though. It could be any DAW that has an EQ with a mid-side mode, or if you have a plugin like Pro Q or another like Waves plugin or something like that that has a mid-side mode, you can do this in that, no problem. So if I put this here, I will turn off ozone just to make sure nothing's going on. So we have a blank Pro Q here. We can hear the whole bass line. So what I'm going to do is there's this channel mode part here, and if I put this into mid-side, it's still going to act like a normal EQ at first. So what I'm going to do is roll off the low end using a low cut. So normally, right now I'm cutting out all the bass. But what I can do is, because we're in mid-side mode, I can set it here to the sides. So I'm only rolling off the low end in the stereo field, and we're doing that at 12 decibels per octave. So this is just the shape of the low end or the low cut. I can make this 96 hertz, and it's more of like a wall, so it'll be less gradual. It'll just be like everything under 437 hertz is gone in the stereo field. But you can sort of have it taper off if you don't want it to be such a dramatic effect. So right now I can still hear the whole bass line, but a lot of the stereo field in the low end is gone. So if I turn this off, you can hear it sort of open up. So I still like that there's some stereo width to it. And the cool thing about this is you can modulate it over time. So if you wanted some sections to have more width than others, like say in a breakdown or an intro, you could. And then when the drop hits, you can make it really sort of down the center. You can also obviously modulate it over time, so you can have it like no mono, no stereo frequencies at all, and sort of bring them in. What I would probably do is set it probably in like the 200 hertz frequency range, just to clean things up, but not to kill all the low end, or sorry, not to kill all the stereo width. And if we look at ozone here again, we're just sort of viewing it with the imager right now. And as I keep them both open, as I bring the frequency up to where we're cutting off the stereo field, you can see the ozone graph getting much more mono, and vice versa. So yeah, I'd probably set it like, I don't know, maybe 150 to 200 hertz, somewhere in there. So you still get a lot of the sides. And again, if you wanted something to be fully mono in a certain section and not fully mono in another, you could do that. What I did here was, when I was testing this video before, is I had this little intro part still in stereo, so I just did it with turning the plugin on and off. So if I have it on in the drop and off prior, it's going to be fully stereo here, and then as soon as the drop hits, we're just cutting all the low end only in the stereo field. The cool thing about Pro Q is you can, I mean, a lot of EQs have this now, but if you wanted to just hear what you were cutting to get a little bit of a better representation of where you want things to roll off, you can use this little headphone button to give you a preview of that. So if I hold this down, this is all the stuff we're getting rid of in the sides. And again, if I turn it on and off, if you're listening on a phone or on a computer, you're probably not going to hear this that much, but if you're listening in headphones or on studio monitors, it's a lot more prominent. This being said, let's do it with the Ableton EQ as well, and that way, if you don't have Pro Q, you can still do it with Ableton, or again, it's the concept that matters, not the plugin. So whatever plugin you have that has a mid-side mode will work. So just to make it sound the same, or at least as close as possible, every plugin is going to have slight differences, but for the most part, the concept will be the same. I'm going to set the frequency to be the same, where it rolls off to be the same. So I'm at 201. If I set my frequency here to 201, and I can turn all of these off too, just so you can see everything a little better. So here I'm at 201. I'm going to set the mode here to mid-side. And right now we're just cutting the mids, and then I can switch it to just the sides. So let's not cut the mids. We will switch it over to side mode, do the same thing, 201. And then we can choose either like a slight roll off or steep curve. I would have to research what this roll off would be. I'm gonna assume it's probably a 12 or 18 dB slope, and the times 4 would be like, well, 48 maybe if it's 12 times 4. So if I turn off Pro Q, again, we're still getting all the low end in the mids, and also I can do the headphone thing, the headphone trick here. So if I turn this button on and hold here, that's all the stuff we're getting rid of. And if I turn the EQ off completely, you can hear the difference. Again, most likely you'll hear the difference better in headphones or on monitors, but it might still come through a little bit on a phone. The third way we can do this is if you have a simple plugin like Utility. So in Ableton, there's this plugin called Utility. You can drop it on here. And you can set the mono to be bass here. You can set the bass to be monoed. You can cut the stereo frequencies from your bass using the utility by turning this little button on here. And you can set where it is, similar to how we did with the EQ, with this slider here. So if we want to do the same, I'm going to set this to 201, and just the bass, anything under 201 hertz is monoed. If I turn this off, and again, this little headphone icon, if we turn that on, we're only hearing what's going on at 201 hertz, whether we turn the monoed bass on or off. So that's like probably the most simple way you can do it. You just have a little bit more control with the mid-side EQ, because then you can also start, you can start boosting and cutting other frequencies. So if I used this instead, I can take, so we have the mid-side mode here, we're in sides. If I wanted the sides in the higher frequency range to sort of stand out a little more, then we can start boosting. And this is just going to give you more stereo imaging, or more content in the stereo field, basically. It's just that way it's going to feel wider, but it's still going to be clean in the low end. So you might not always want to do this. It depends how much other stereo content you have going on in the track. But if you wanted to emphasize sort of like the space in the high end of a sound, you could do it using the same EQ rather than having a bunch of different, like say a utility and then an EQ just boosting high frequency range. So yeah, that's another way to do it. The most manual way to do it would be to have two of the same sound. So if I delete all these plugins, I could have two of the same sound, and for one of them, the EQ8 and the utility. So I would need basically, this example is if you don't have an EQ that has mid-side mode, but you have just a regular EQ and you have a way to mono the bass, what you could do is, say, roll off all the high end. So let's say we'll put it again at 201 just for consistency. So 201. This is just my bass, and I'm gonna put the whole sound in mono. Then on my second one, what I'll do is take the same EQ, drop it on my second copy of the sound, and then instead of high cutting, so rolling off all the high end, I'm gonna roll off all the low end. And now that way my stereo frequency range, the stereo frequencies in the high end are still there, and the stereo frequencies in the low end are gone because I've monoed the whole sound. But if I played them both, it's essentially giving us what we had by either using a mid-side EQ or using this little bass mono thing, bass mono button on the utility. So there's lots of ways you can do this. I just wanted to show a couple different ways depending on what software you're using, which EQs you like or have access to. And it's really just about cleaning up the low end so that you don't have things clashing, and things are just more focused. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it didn't go too long. I'm going to try and edit it down so it's not. But if you have any questions or anything for me, just leave a comment, or you can even email me if you wanted to, kelly94@live.com. It's Kelley. And yeah, just get in touch. If you want to see me do anything else, let me know what you're interested in, and I can try and go into that. Or I can try and learn about it first and then get into it if I don't know. So yeah, hope this was helpful, and maybe we'll see some more videos soon. Peace.